All right, guys, so this is the last exam review. This is being recorded again, so let's get started. So this is gonna be about the brain and its structures, the spinal cord. There's some nerves in there, and the biggest part are the cranial nerves, all 12 of them. So let's get started. Um, the first question is, what is the falx cerebri? It is a layer of dura matter that descends between the two brain hemispheres. So literally, you know how the brain is split up into left and right hemispheres? Well, the falx cerebri is a piece of connective tissue that goes down in between those hemispheres and separates them. Now, the falx cerebelli is another layer between the cerebri and the tentorium. And the tentorium itself separates the cerebrum from the cerebellum. So the cerebellum is that small little pouch in the back right next to the brainstem, and the cerebrum is the whole entire brain, like the frontal cord, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, all those main four lobes. That's the cerebrum, and the cerebellum is that small little pouch on the back, and the tentorium cerebelli separates those two structures. Okay, so the primary motor neuron, or when we say motor neuron in the central nervous system, just means cell bodies or the soma, okay? So where is the primary motor neuron located, or where is the main cell bodies for motor function? Well, that's the precentral gyrus, okay? And then sensory is located in the postcentral gyrus. Now, this next is asking about each of the lobes of the brain. Well, you have the frontal lobe is in front, right next to our ears, our temporal lobe. Our parietal lobe is on top right here, and then behind it, our vision center is the occipital lobe. Okay, what separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe? We call the central sulcus. Okay, sulcus are the depressions in the brain. So these little things right here, that's a sulcus, sulcus, sulcus. Okay, they're like the little depressions in the brain. Now the things, the ridges that stick out of the brain, like these things, this area right here, this area, these are called gyrus. So when we talk about the precentral gyrus and postcentral gyrus, is literally these bumps on either side from the central sulcus. The front one is the precentral gyrus. That front bump is the precentral gyrus. That's where the motor things happen. And then behind it, the second bump, the other gyrus or the postcentral gyrus, is for sensory. The reason why they call it pre and post central, because it's literally before and after the central solstice. Okay. What is the basal nuclei and where is it located? It's just mass of gray matter found deep within the cortical white matter. Um, the corpus callosum is literally how the brain communicates, how the left and right brain communicate with one another. And that is just made up of millions of axons. Okay, and the function is to communicate between hemispheres. So when people have a type of epilepsy, one of these treatments that they have is to cut the corpus callosum. That way, if let's say you're having seizures on the left side of the brain, then it is not able to travel to the right side of the brain. You cut the corpus callosum, and the seizure just stays on one side of the brain. That's just one example. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the hypothalamus and the thalamus. Knowing their functions is a good idea to know. Okay, so the hypothalamus maintains homeostasis in the body. It links the nervous system to the endocrine system. The thalamus is composed of gray matter and it relays sensory and motor information. The thalamus, anything that comes up to the brain goes through the thalamus. The thalamus's job is to send the signal where it needs to go. Okay? What is the globus pallidus and where is it located? Um, it is the structure of the brain involved in the regulation of voluntary movement. Okay, and this is near the hypothalamus and thalamus. Next question, what is the putamen and where is it located? It is the outermost portion of the basal ganglia associated with motor control, emotions, cognition, and learning. Okay. Any questions so far? These structures, they're not really too important. I don't believe they show up, but just make sure you know them generally, okay? Okay, so the limbic system. All you see right here is part of the limbic system. The hippocampus, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the olfactory bulb. Okay, and one part of it, there is a structure not labeled here. It's called the substantia nigra. Okay, and this is involved in eye movement, motor planning, reward seeking, learning, and addiction. There is another structure called the corpora quadrigemina, and this is just the reflex sensors involved with hearing and seeing. The pons communicates with the forebrain. It deals with the sleep respiration, swallowing, eye movement, posture, equilibrium, and bladder control. All right, the function of the cerebellum is to make sure we have smooth voluntary movements. Okay, it coordinates our voluntary movements. The reason why we walk so smoothly is because of the cerebellum. When we're doing a specific voluntary action, you're able to pick up the glass smoothly. It's not a choppy movement. You're not dropping the water everywhere. That's the cerebellum doing its job. Okay. Um, in the cerebellum, which is on the next slide, there's a bunch of white axons or white matter that we call, and they kind of look like a tree. And what we call that the tree of life. And it's located in the cerebellum. And all it does is just bring sensory and motor information to the cerebellum. Why these are just axons? What do axons do? They just bring information to wherever they're located. Um, what are pyramidal cells? These are special types of neurons in the brain, okay? And they are specifically excitatory. So they get activated, they are they have having some sort of excitation effect, whether that's pulling up a memory or being able to drink water or being able to respond to fear. That's what the amygdala does. All of these neurons are excitatory. So this is the tree of life I was talking to you about. These white things, okay? If you cut the cerebellum in half, which is what's shown here, you see these white matter projections called the tree of life. So this is where the pons, where we were talking about, okay? The medulla oblongata is right below it. This is also an important structure to know. Okay. We talked about the corpora quadrigemina. This is the reflex center. And again, we talked about the arbor vitae. Now, there won't be too much labeling on this, if there will be any labeling at all. It's mostly just function, okay? Now, the meninges is the next topic. The meninges is just a protective layer, okay, that protects the brain and spinal cord. Okay, you have different layers. You have the outermost layer, which is the dura mater, okay, and then right below that, you have the arachnoid mater, and then close to the brain and spinal cord, you have the third layer called the pia mater, okay? And in between these spaces, in between these layers, you have spaces. So between the dura mater and the arachnoid mater, you have the subdural space, okay? And then between the arachnoid matter and the pia mater, you have this subarachnoid space. These names are pretty easy to remember as long as you know the first three layers. There are two layers of empty space below the dura mater and the arachnoid matter. So the space that's below the dura mater is called the subdural space. Easy. The space that's below the arachnoid matter is subarachnoid space. Okay, it's these five things that make up the meninges. Okay, now the subarachnoid space, what's special about the subarachnoid space is that it has the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, remember that the ependymal cells is what makes the cerebrospinal fluid. And when it's produced, it just chills in the subarachnoid space and going around the brain, the ventricles, the spinal cord. Okay, now you have these granulations in the arachnoid matter that are sticking out into the dura matter. Okay, and the purpose of this is just to have the drainage of the cerebrospinal fluid. Remember, this needs to be recycled. Same fluid can't be there forever. It's produced, it does its thing, it circulates, and then it needs to be drained so new cerebrospinal fluid could come through. All right, next we have the ventricles of the brain. Pretty easy. You have these two big ventricles called the lateral ventricles, and between them is the interventricular foramen. Okay, right below that, you have the third ventricle connected by the cerebral aqueduct that goes down into the fourth ventricle. And then from the fourth ventricle, you have the central canal that goes down to the spinal cord. Okay, and this is just how these are just the empty spaces where the cerebral spinal fluid moves. Okay, and the function of the cerebral spinal fluid is nutrition. It helps clean up debris, lubrication. These are some of the functions of that. All right, these receptor types, this is also important. Make sure you at least know alpha 1, 2, and beta 1, 2, okay? So the D doesn't matter, it does not test that, okay? So you have sympathetic receptors, so receptors that we cannot control. This is the autonomic nervous system. All these receptors are out of our voluntary control. The first alpha 1 receptor, all it does is located in the vascular smooth muscle, and if those are activated, you increase contraction of the smooth muscles. Okay? Next, we have alpha 2 receptors, and it's located in the central nervous system, and it decreases sympathetic outflow, meaning, so if there's a fight or flight event going on, well, this is a bad example, but if there is a fight or flight event going on, let's say these alpha 2 receptors kick in for some reason, then you won't have that fight or flight response anymore, okay? Then we have a beta 1. These are on the cardiac cells. They increase heart rate, increase contractility, and increase renin release. But the heart rate and contractility are the most important things. So alpha 1, smooth muscles. Beta 1, cardiac. Alpha 2, central nervous system. But that one is not as important. And then lastly, we have beta 2 cells or receptors, sorry, and these are mostly in the lungs or the bronchioles, okay? And what they do is they vasodilate or they increase the diameter of the vessel so more air can go through. Okay, there are different medications that act on these receptors. Let's say you have a beta 2 medication that activates the beta 2 receptors, right? You have trouble breathing, you can't breathe. So they give you a medication that activates these beta 2 receptors, and boom, your lungs open up and you're able to breathe better. Okay? All right. So we're talking about the spinal cord a little bit here now. So we have ascending tracts and descending tracts. Ascending tracts are sensory. And when we talk about tracts, we just mean the axons. Okay, and this makes sense because the axons going up to the brain are sensory. Why? Because the brain needs to receive the sensory information. And then once the descending tracts or the descending axons are the motor ones. This also makes sense because after the brain has processed the sensory information, it needs to send out a response. Your brain is on top of the body. The only way that response can go is down, right? So these descending tracts are motor information that instructs the body what to do. That's whatever it is. If you have a fly that lands on your hand and you need to remove it, the sensory information travels up the ascending tracts, brain processes it, and then the motor tracks descend, they go to your arm and they like move, and then you move your hand. Okay, we're talking about the fasciculus gracilis and the fasciculus cutanus. All of these are just tracks, okay? Tracks. They're just axons that go up and down and that carry sensory and motor information. I'll show you where they are right now. Okay, so these two things, the fasciculus gracilis and the cunatus, they are all part of the dorsal white column. So all of this right here, that is the dorsal white column. So that part of the spinal cord has to do with touch, tickle, pressure, vibration. Okay, so these are the main tracks. The ascending tracks, the one that carries sensory information, you have the dorsal white column, and then you have the ventral spinal thalamic tract. These are the most important ones. Okay, I believe he does ask about this. So these two are ascending tracts and they carry sensory information. So the ventral spinal thalamic tract carries information such as pain and temperature, and the dorsal white column is for touch, pressure, proprioception. And proprioception is your ability to know where your body part is in space. So I can raise my hand out and I know my hand is out. I don't need to look at my arm to know what it's doing. Then you have the descending tracts. These carry motor information. Okay. The important ones are the vestibulospinal tract, the rubrospinal tract, and the lateral reticulospinal tract. Okay, just know their names and at least one function and you'll be fine. All right, now in the brain and spinal cord, you have different orders of neurons. Okay, the third order neurons are usually up here in the brain. Second order neurons are right here in the cerebellum, brainstem area. Okay, because you have the medulla oblongata right here, the pons above it. And then your first order neurons are located right here, our spinal cord. Okay, so first order, second order, third order in the brain. Now, the difference between pre and post ganglionic neurons is just that. Let's see what we have. Let me draw this out, it'll be easier. So we have a nucleus here, an axon here, and then we have another axon here. Okay, so this area right here is called the ganglion. Okay, it's just a bunch of subbodies together in the peripheral nervous system. So sensory information comes down here in the pre-ganglionic fiber. So whatever that is, information goes down here. And then it jumps from the pre-ganglionic to the post-ganglionic cell. And then the information or that signal continues down. All right, the cranial nerves, Carlos, this is extremely important, bro. A lot of these questions come from cranial nerves. So I'm gonna go over all of them with you. Just make sure you know these, okay? I'm gonna go through every single one of them. All right, so to the left, this image is the location of the cranial nerves. Okay, this is the underside of the brain. Okay, so the cerebellum is right here with the pons and the medulla next to it, and then this right here is all of the cerebrum. Okay, we're looking at the underside of the brain right now. So the first cranial nerve is the olfactory nerve. Okay, it consists of the olfactory bulb, which is this circle thing. Well, this e um, elliptical thing right here. And then right below it is the olfactory tract where the smell senses travel down to. So both of these two structures make up the olfactory nerve. And this is simply a sensory. Okay. Then the second one is the optic nerve, which is right here. Pretty easy, connects to the eyes. And we have the optic chiasma or the chiasm right here. This is where the signals of the eyes cross and goes to the brain. But anyways, optic nerve is the second one. This is also sensory and it provides the sense of vision. Next, we have the ocular motor. These are these little thin ones sticking out of the structure right here. Okay, and it's in the name, ocular motor. It just provides movement for the eyes. Okay. We have six extrinsic muscles. It innervates four of them. But those details, I don't believe are too important. Just know that the ocular motor nerve is to move the four of the six muscles of the eye. Next, we have the trochlear nerve, is right next to the ocular motor, is this even smaller nerve sticking out right here. Okay, and this is also a motor, and this one moves the eye. Okay, the ocular motor innervates four of the six extrinsic muscles. The trochlear nerve innervates the fifth one, the superior oblique. Next, we have the trigeminal, which is these three things right here. Easy to know. The name is trigeminal for a reason because it has three nerves sticking out of it. Okay. And this one it's also mixed, so it provides sensory information about your face and it allows you to actually move your face or parts of it. Okay. And the trigeminal nerve is mostly focused on the muscles of chewing. Next, we have the abducens nerve. This is a motor. Okay, and this innervates the sixth eye muscle. Okay, so what innervates the eye muscles? That might be a question. So you have the abducens nerve, you have the trochlear nerve, and then you obviously have the ocular motor nerve. Okay, these three nerves, all of them together completely control the eye. Okay, next we have the facial nerve, which is right next to the abducens. Okay, and this one is pretty simple. It's in the name. It provides motor innervation of your facial expressions. Okay, and it also provides sensory information about tasting. So you can move your face and it allows you to taste. Next is the vestibulocochlear nerve. This one is purely sensory. It just provides senses for hearing and equilibrium. Remember, the vestibule is in the ear that provides balance, and the cochlea is also in the ear and that provides hearing. So vestibular cochlear nerve provides information about hearing and balance. Next, we have the glossopharyngeal. This is also in the name. This controls the tongue. Okay, this is a mixed nerve. Next, we have the vagus nerve. We're almost done here, bro. I know this is a lot, but make sure you know these, okay? It's gonna really help you. So next we have the vagus nerve. This is a mixed nerve. This one goes all the way down into our digestive tract. Okay. Um, it has a lot of functions. It allows you to speak, to swallow. It innervates a lot of the thoracic and abdominal um, organs that are involved in the parasympathetic system. So rest and digest. So again, your digestive tract, your intestines, it works to activate those. All right, then the 11th nerve, we have the hypoglossal. This one also innervates the tongue. And then lastly, the accessory nerve. This one innervates the trapezius muscle and our sternocleidomastoid. Okay, so 12 cranial nerves. Make sure you know their locations and their function. Okay, next we have our sympathetic response versus parasympathetic response. So what happens during sympathetic activation, aka fight or flight? So what do you expect to happen? So of course, we do not want anything to do with digestion going on, right? Because we're in immediate danger. We need to get the heck out of here. So we start producing saliva. Our stomach activity comes to a halt. Okay, intestinal activity comes to a halt because we don't want these things to be working. We want to run and get the heck out of there. So what does work? Your heart increases blood. That way your muscles can have the oxygen it needs. Your airways, they get relaxed, they open up. Why? More oxygen can come in. You can breathe more and be able to do the activity you need to do, whether that's running away or that's fighting. Glucose is released from the liver. Why? So you need immediate energy. Your body's not gonna wait for you to have a Snickers bar to get the heck out of there. Okay, it needs you to get out of there right now. So it releases glucose, quick energy. So this is the sympathetic system being activated. Now on the other side of it, we have our parasympathetic system, our rest and digest. Right? This is mostly after we're eating. So the itis that we feel after we eat is normal to a certain extent, right? You do need to feel sleepy because your body needs to start digesting. That's your parasympathetic system activating, is doing its thing. So we expect the opposite to happen. We don't want to run away. We just want our digestion to work. So saliva is stimulated, of course. We're eating. We need the saliva to start the digestion. We really don't need blood flow too much, so our heartbeat slows down. Okay? Your airways are sort of constricted. You don't need to that much oxygen. You're resting. You're going into a state of resting. However, not all things related to your stomach and intestine are activated. So stomach activity begins, intestinal activity begins. Your liver is holding on to the glucose. It doesn't need to release it. It doesn't need energy. Why? Because you're receiving energy. And then lastly, your gallbladder is stimulated just to take out the digestive enzymes to pump into the stomach so you can digest your food. All right, next we have our special senses. This is also an important topic. Okay, these are the taste, the ears, so smell, hearing, and vision. So the eyes, the mouth, and the ears. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so make sure you study these outside of what I'm about to tell you, just to make sure you know everything there is to know. Okay, I'm telling you the important parts, but it's still, I might have missed something. You might read something that I didn't put here. Just make sure you study these, okay? So where are the structures? Where are the structures of the olfactory nerve? Okay, we had talked about that before. They're on the underside of the brain. We have the olfactory bulb that leads to the olfactory tract. The next question is what cranial nerve responds to smell? And that's the first cranial nerve. Okay? The olfactory nerve provides a sense of smell. We have olfactory receptors in our nose. Okay? So this is basically it right here. This is our nose on the bottom, and then we're going deeper and deeper up into the olfactory nerve right here. So we start off with the olfactory epithelium, obviously, okay? We have special receptors that pick up these these smell chemicals. They're they attach to these receptors, and that signal is sent up into the mitral cell that eventually leads into the olfactory bulb. Okay? Oh shoot. All right, taste. What are the cranial nerves for taste? So the specific ones are the facial nerve, the 7, and then glossopharyngeal number 9. Okay, these are specifically involved for sensory of the taste buds. Okay. What are the different types of tongue papilla? And then where are the taste buds located? So let's talk about the papilla on the bottom. Actually, first, let's continue with the cranial nerves. Okay, so these cranial nerves, number 7, the facial and the glossopharyngeal, they're activated. These impulses travel to the thalamus, and then the thalamus. Remember how I said the thalamus was the relay information? So anything that goes to the brain has to go through the thalamus. So this is what's going on. These impulses goes to the thalamus, and the thalamus sends it to the right place. Okay? Whether there's the gustatory cortex for taste or the hypothalamus itself to appreciate the taste. All right. The different types of tongue papilla are these three things here: filiform, fungiform, and circumvallate. Okay. So here we go. We have the fungiform, which is most of the papilla on our tongue. Okay. Then we have the circumvallate, which are back here, kind of deeper into the mouth. And they call it circumvallate because they literally make circles. Okay. And then we have our filiform, which is not really pictured here. So the taste buds are found in the papilla of the tongue, okay? And the ones that do have the taste buds are the fungiform and the circumvallate papilla. Okay, so the filiform, it does not have the taste buds. Now we're moving on to the ear. What is the function of the semicircular canal? So the function of it is just to monitor the equilibrium. Okay, just to make sure you're balanced and you're upright. So there are three canals, and they just literally lie in the same place. All right, these semicircular canals, just to see them, once you see it, you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, easy. Okay, next we're gonna talk about the cochlea. The cochlea is the structure for hearing. Okay, it's a spiral conical bony chamber. Okay, it extends from the anterior vestibule. So remember we said the vestibule is for balance. So they're right next to each other. Okay, coils around a bony pillar. It contains the cochlear duct where the sound travels through. And then it also contains the organ of Corti. And this is how we actually hear because of this organ located in the cochlea. Now, the function of the auditory tube is to equalize air pressure between the tympanic cavity or our eardrum and the nasopharynx. And the nasopharynx is just the passageway of our nose, okay? Provides equal pressure when sound comes in. And then lastly, what cranial nerve responds to hearing? And it is the vestibulocochlear nerve, okay? For each of these special senses, we talked about the nerves associated with these senses, or to make sure you know these. All right, so here we go. This is the ear. Very, very complicated structures. So this is the semicircular canal that I was telling you about. Okay, this is the cochlea right here, this snail-like thing. And right below it is the vestibule. This is the vestibule right here. Okay, that darker shade thing. The things on top are the semicircular canals. Below it is the vestibule, the actual organ or the structure for balance. Okay. There are three little bones in the outer ear. Okay, the malleus, the stapes. I believe. Let me double check. Yes, exactly. So the malleus looks like a hammer. The stapes looks something like this. It's kind of like a U. It looks like a stirrup. I don't know if you're familiar with horses, but on the saddle, there on the bottom, there's like a foothold that's called the stirrup, and literally the bone looks just like that. And the incus is the one in the middle between them. All right, we're almost done here. Now we have the structures of the eyes. What are the extrinsic muscles of the eyes? We talked about this a lot. I remember I talked about this in the last exam review or the one before that. Pretty simple. Four rectus, two obliques. Okay, rectus are very easy. It's up, down, left, right. So superior rectus, inferior rectus, lateral rectus, medial rectus. Okay, and they move the eye in the direction the name indicates. So the superior rectus moves your eye up. Inferior rectus moves your eye down. Lateral rectus moves your eye laterally, so away from the median. Okay? Medial moves it towards the middle or the median, so away towards the middle. So if you look towards your eyes, towards your nose, that's your medial rectus allowing you to do that. If you look away from your nose to your left or right, then that's your lateral rectus. Obviously, if you're moving both your eyes at the same time, one lateral is working and the medial is working for the other one, right? Because your eyes don't move separately, they move in the same direction. Okay, next we have our obliques. Superior, inferior. Now these muscles move the eye in the opposite direction. So the superior oblique moves the eye down and lateral. The inferior oblique moves the eyes up and lateral. Okay? Okay, the cranial nerves that correspond to the eye. We have, remember the six, the ocular motor that innervates four of the six eye muscles, which are these here. And then we have the abducens, which innervates the lateral rectus. And then we have the trochlear nerve, which innervates the superior obliques. Now, the cornea is a transparent portion of the eye, and this is what lets the light enter the eye. Is a membrane, okay? It lines the eyelids, it covers the whites of the eyes, and protects the eyes. All right, there's some of eye anatomy right here. Okay, let's see. We have the rectus muscles on the side, the oblique muscles on top. The cornea is this white sheet here. Okay. So I definitely go into more detail with the eye anatomy, okay? Next, we're talking about the aqueous humor and the vitreous humor. This is just still some eye anatomy stuff, okay? The aqueous humor is a plasma-like fluid that fills the segment and drains the eye, okay? It supports, nourishes, and removes waste. Now, the vitreous humor is a transparent, watery gel within the vitreous chamber, okay? They both serve to lubricate the eye, to protect the eye. Now, where do you find most of the cones within the retina? They're found in the macula lutea, okay, in the fovea centralis. That's where most of the cones are. So these pigments, vitamin A and retinol, the pigment, okay, they're necessary component for visual purple, okay? They are like within the rod and the cones of the retina. If we have inadequate quantities of vitamin, then we have a chance of losing our vision, okay? So extremely important for our eye health and the production of retinol. All right, now we're done with special senses. Your professor likes to talk about pathologies, or Dr. Garcia does. I'm not sure if Professor Bido talks about pathologies, but here are some of the common ones. We have dyslexia, it's just a learning disorder, involves difficulty reading. A seizure, pretty straightforward, is a temporary abnormal electrical activity. Usually it changes your mental state. You're either tonic or you're just moving around and you're seizing up. Apraxia is a logical disorder. You can't learn familiar movements. Okay, that's the problem with apraxia. So even though you understand how to do it, you want to do it, something is going on in your brain that you just can't do it. The motor control, the motor aspect is just not working. Next, we have Bell's palsy. A is just considered temporary weakness or paralysis of the muscles in the face. They have ataxia, is a lack of muscle control or voluntary movements. Next, we have aphasia, is just an impairment of language. Okay. I'm not going into too much detail. Carlos, you don't have to either. Just know these first couple things about each of them and you're good. Dysphagia is a condition that affects your ability to produce and understand spoken language. Okay? So dysphagia has to do with your inability to speak your language. And then aphasia is you're having difficulty understanding language. So they're pretty much similar, aphasia and dysphagia. It's just they're just suggested that aphasia is just more severe. Okay. Dysphagia is more moderate language impairments, while aphasia is more severe. That's basically it for this. I could just about everything really. Just make sure you go back and study these special senses, the cranial nerves, and stuff like that. Do you have any questions for me, Carlos?